The billionaire was about to sign his bankruptcy at 8 a.m., until a black waitress spotted the mistake. What if the difference between losing everything and saving a billion-dollar empire came down to a single document that nobody else bothered to read? At exactly 7:47 a.m. on a gray Tuesday morning, 42-year-old CEO Robert Caldwell sat in a cramped corner booth at Mel's Diner, his expensive suit wrinkled from a sleepless night. The bankruptcy papers spread before him told a story of betrayal, failed investments, and a company his grandfather built, crumbling to dust. His hands trembled as he reached for the pen. 3 minutes until his lawyer's call, 3 minutes until he'd sign away 3 generations of family legacy. But sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from a 35-year-old waitress named Denise who'd learned to notice things others missed, who'd survived enough heartbreak to recognize when someone's world was falling apart. Where are you watching from tonight? Robert had built Caldwell Industries from a small family construction company into a nationwide empire, just like his grandfather had dreamed. For 15 years, he'd poured his soul into every contract, every expansion, every decision. The company meant everything, not just the money, but the legacy, the employees who'd become family, the communities they'd helped rebuild after disasters. His late wife Michelle would have been so proud to see how far they'd come. But 6 months ago, everything changed. His business partner and childhood friend, James Morrison, had convinced him to invest heavily in a revolutionary new building material. "Trust me, Bobby," James had said with that confident smile. "This'll make us both legends." The investment required liquidating most of their cash reserves and taking on massive debt, but the potential returns seemed worth the risk. Denise Thompson moved between tables with quiet efficiency, refilling coffee cups and checking on her regulars. She'd been working double shifts at Mel's for 3 years, ever since her husband left, and she'd had to start over at 32. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills for her and her 8-year-old daughter, Amber. More importantly, it taught her to read people, to notice when old Mr. Peterson was having a rough day with his arthritis, or when teenage Lisa needed someone to listen to her boyfriend troubles. This morning felt different, though. The man in the expensive suit had ordered coffee an hour ago and hadn't touched it. His phone buzzed constantly, but he never answered. Papers covered his table, official-looking documents with red stamps and signatures. She'd seen that hollow look before, in her own mirror during the divorce. It was the expression of someone watching their world collapse. Robert's phone rang. His lawyer's name flashed on the screen, right on schedule. "Bobby, you ready? The bankruptcy judge is expecting those papers by 9. Once you sign, we can start the liquidation process." Robert closed his eyes, remembering his grandfather's calloused hands teaching him to read blueprints, his father's pride when Robert closed his first $1 million deal, Michelle's laugh echoing through the empty office late at night when they'd worked together planning expansions. "I need 5 more minutes," he whispered. 5 minutes won't change anything." James cleaned out the accounts before he disappeared to the Bahamas. The contracts he signed for that material were fake. The whole company was a shell corporation. You've got creditors breathing down your neck and employees depending on severance pay. The sooner we file, the sooner we can salvage something for them. Robert hung up and stared at the signature line. 24 hours ago, he'd been worth nearly $1 billion. Now he couldn't even afford the coffee growing cold in front of him. Denise had quietly comped it when she noticed his credit card being declined. Everything he'd built, everything his family had worked for, was gone because he'd trusted the wrong person. He picked up the pen, his hand steady despite the storm raging inside. This was it. The end of Caldwell Industries. The end of everything. But sometimes the smallest kindnesses from strangers can change everything. Sometimes a waitress notices what million-dollar lawyers miss. Denise approached the table with fresh coffee, noticing how the man's shoulders shook slightly as he held the pen. She'd learned not to intrude on customers' private moments, but something about his pain reminded her of her own darkest hours. "More coffee, sir?" she asked gently. Robert looked up with eyes that held decades of dreams crashing down. "Thank you. I'm sorry for taking up your booth for so long." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm just saying goodbye to something important. Take all the time you need, Denise said, meaning it. During her divorce, strangers' small kindnesses had kept her afloat. Sometimes goodbyes take longer than we expect. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye, a line of text on the document that didn't match the others. Her ex-husband had been a paralegal before he became addicted to gambling, and she'd helped him with paperwork countless times. This looked wrong somehow. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "I don't mean to pry, but is this a legal document?" Robert nodded, embarrassed. "Bankruptcy papers. My business partner disappeared with everything, left me holding worthless contracts. I have to sign by 8 a.m. Denise glanced at the papers again. "I used to help my ex with legal stuff. This might sound crazy, but could I look at this for a second? Something seems off." She studied the contract James had signed for the building material investment. The company letterhead looked official, but the incorporation date listed was 3 weeks after the contract was supposedly signed. Her heart began racing. "Sir, when did your partner sign this?" "March 15th. Why? Look at this." She pointed to the fine print. This company wasn't legally incorporated until April 3rd. They couldn't have entered contracts before they existed. Robert's eyes widened as the implications hit him. If the contract was fraudulent, then the debt it created might be legally void. But there was more. Buried in the complex legal language, Denise spotted something else. "This clause here," she said, her finger tracing the text. "It says any party who knowingly enters false contracts forfeits all claim to company assets. If your partner signed this knowing the company was fake, then he stole from Caldwell Industries illegally," Robert finished, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to call the police," Denise said quietly. "And probably the FBI. Wire fraud across state lines is a federal crime." Robert stared at the woman who'd just saved everything he'd ever worked for. "Why would you help a complete stranger?" "Because," Denise smiled, thinking of her own second chances, "sometimes we all need someone to notice when things aren't what they seem." But their relief would be short-lived. At that moment, a black sedan pulled up outside Mel's diner, and 2 men in suits stepped out, heading straight for the entrance. The men entered with the confidence of people accustomed to intimidation. The taller one, wearing an expensive watch, scanned the diner until his eyes landed on Robert. "Mr. Caldwell? I'm Agent Peterson, FBI Financial Crimes Division. This is Agent Williams. We need to speak with you immediately." Robert's blood ran cold. Had James somehow framed him for the fraud? "Am I under arrest?" "That depends," Agent Peterson said, sliding into the booth. "We've been investigating Morrison Financial Solutions for 3 months. Your business partner, James Morrison, is wanted for running a $20 million Ponzi scheme across 6 states. You were his largest victim, but we need to understand your involvement." Denise stepped back, her heart pounding. She'd just inserted herself into a federal investigation. What if she'd made everything worse? What if her interference somehow implicated her in the crime? She thought about Amber, waiting for her at school, counting on her mom to stay out of trouble. "I had no involvement," Robert said firmly. "James was my childhood friend. I trusted him completely. He convinced me to invest everything in fake companies I'd never heard of." Agent Williams pulled out a tablet showing bank records. "We've traced the money to accounts in the Bahamas, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands. Morrison fled the country 2 days ago, but here's what's interesting. He made a critical error that we can use to freeze all his assets." Robert leaned forward desperately. "What kind of error?" "The same one your waitress here just discovered," Agent Peterson said, nodding toward Denise. "False incorporation dates, forged contracts, fraudulent business licenses. Morrison got greedy and sloppy. But we need original documents to prove the timeline." Denise's hands shook as she realized the implications. These papers weren't just Robert's salvation, they were evidence in a federal case that could help dozens of other victims. "The contracts are right here," she said quietly. "I can show you exactly what's wrong with them." For the next 30 minutes, Denise walked the agents through every discrepancy she'd noticed, her ex-husband's legal training proving invaluable. The incorporation dates, the forged signatures, the impossible timeline, it all painted a picture of systematic fraud. "Ma'am," Agent Williams said finally, "you may have just helped us build an airtight case against Morrison. Are you willing to testify about finding these irregularities?" Denise looked at Robert, whose eyes held a mixture of hope and gratitude that took her breath away. 3 hours ago, she'd been a single mom serving coffee and worrying about rent. Now she was a key witness in a federal fraud case. "I have a daughter," she said carefully. "Will testifying put her in danger?" "Morrison is already out of the country and won't risk returning," Agent Peterson assured her. "Your testimony could help recover millions stolen from teachers' pension funds, veterans' disability payments, and small business owners like Mr. Caldwell. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments." The agents gathered the documents, promising Robert that asset recovery would begin immediately. "Mr. Caldwell, based on what we've seen here, you should have most of your company's money back within 60 days. As the FBI agents left, Robert and Denise sat in stunned silence. But outside, another car had been watching the entire exchange. James Morrison's associate had been monitoring Robert's movements, and now he knew exactly how much trouble they were in. The black Mercedes pulled away as Agent Peterson's phone rang. "Sir, we have a problem. Our surveillance team just spotted Morrison's right-hand man, Marcus Webb, outside the diner. He's been watching the whole time." Inside, Denise felt her world tilt off balance. "They were watching us." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "What does that mean for my daughter?" Robert's protective instincts kicked in immediately. After losing Michelle to cancer 2 years ago, he understood the fierce love a parent feels. "We're not letting anything happen to Amber. I promise you that." Agent Williams spoke rapidly into his radio, coordinating protection details. "Mrs. Thompson, we're sending units to your daughter's school right now. She'll be safe, but we need to move you both to a secure location until Webb is apprehended." Denise's mind raced. She couldn't afford to miss work, couldn't uproot Amber's life, couldn't drag her child into this nightmare. "Maybe I should just forget what I saw. Pretend this never happened." "No," Robert said firmly, reaching across the table to steady her trembling hands. "You saved my company, my employees' jobs, my grandfather's legacy. You helped expose a criminal who stole from veterans and teachers. Running now would mean letting him get away with it." Through the diner window, they watched as FBI agents surrounded Webb's position. The man who'd been James Morrison's enforcer, who'd intimidated witnesses and hidden evidence across 3 states, was finally cornered. But he wasn't going quietly. Webb bolted from his car, racing toward the diner's back entrance. Agent Peterson shouted into his radio, "He's heading for the kitchen. Civilians inside." Robert stood, placing himself between Denise and the back door. "Whatever happens, stay behind me." "I can't let you," Denise began. "Yes, you can," Robert said with quiet conviction. 3 months ago, I thought about ending everything. The stress, the betrayal, the idea of failing everyone who counted on me, it was crushing me. But today, a stranger showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return. Today, you reminded me what real integrity looks like." Webb burst through the kitchen door, wild-eyed and desperate. "Where are those documents? Morrison wants them destroyed." Agent Williams appeared behind him, weapon drawn. "It's over, Webb. We have everything we..." If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Denise stared at the article, tears streaming down her face. The charity she'd applied to last year, the one that had taken her application fee and disappeared, it was one of Morrison's fronts. "You didn't just save my company," Robert said softly. "You helped bring justice to your own case, too." But the biggest surprise was still to come, and it would change both their lives forever. 2 months later, Denise stood in the gleaming lobby of Caldwell Industries, wearing a business suit that actually fit properly for the first time in her adult life. The FBI had recovered 90% of the stolen funds, and Robert had kept his promise about taking care of the woman who'd saved everything. "Nervous about your first day?" Robert asked, joining her by the elevator. "Terrified," she admitted with a laugh. "Yesterday, I was serving coffee. Today, I'm the director of legal compliance for a billion-dollar company. What if I mess up? Then you'll figure it out and fix it, just like you did at the diner," Robert said simply. "You have something money can't buy, the ability to see what others miss and the courage to speak up about it." The position had been Robert's idea, but the board approved it unanimously after hearing how Denise had uncovered the fraud. Her job would be reviewing all major contracts and investments, ensuring no one could ever deceive Caldwell Industries again. The salary was more than she'd ever dreamed possible, with full benefits and a college scholarship fund for Amber. "Mr. Caldwell?" A young woman approached, Jenny, the new assistant. "The FBI agents are here for the final deposition." They walked together to the conference room where Agents Peterson and Williams waited with boxes of evidence. "Thanks to you both," Agent Peterson said, "we've recovered over $40 million for Morrison's victims. Teachers can retire with dignity, veterans are getting their disability payments, and 17 small business owners can rebuild their companies." Agent Williams added, "Morrison was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison yesterday. Webb got 15. They won't be hurting anyone else." After the agents left, Robert and Denise stood at the window overlooking the city. Construction crews worked on 3 new Caldwell projects: a veterans housing complex, a community center, and affordable apartments for single mothers. It felt like the company was rebuilding more than buildings, it was rebuilding trust. "I keep thinking about that morning," Denise said quietly. "If I hadn't noticed those dates, if I'd minded my own business." "But you did notice," Robert replied. "And you spoke up, even when you had every reason not to get involved. You taught me that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places." Denise smiled, thinking about Amber's excitement when she'd heard about the new job, the new apartment in a safe neighborhood, the college fund that would let her daughter dream bigger than either of them had ever imagined. "You know what's funny? I always told Amber that kindness matters more than money. I just never realized they could work together." "Your grandfather would be proud," she continued, remembering the stories Robert had shared about the old man who'd built the company on integrity and hard work. Robert nodded, feeling Michelle's presence in the warm afternoon light streaming through the windows. "He always said the best business deals happen when everyone wins. I think this qualifies." As they returned to work, Denise carried with her the same worn notebook she'd used at Mel's diner, still ready to notice the details others might miss. Some habits, the good ones, were worth keeping forever. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of redemption, kindness, and the power of paying attention to the details that matter most.